I'm Dan Ferguson, and I'm giving this talk about history because I guess I'm the oldest one in the room. I don't know. But, I've been collecting pinball machines, started out collecting pinball machines in 1975. So I've been doing it for a few years. My current collection, I have, last count, about, let's see, 250 pinball machines, another 120 arcade games and trade simulators. I started out, let's say, in the 70s. That's when they switched from the EMs to solid states. EMs were a dime a dozen. Everybody was getting rid of them. So, and that's where I got in and started fooling with them and getting them because doing it. It's always just been a hobby. I've never been part of the business. So it's just always been as a hobby for me. And so the trouble is, be careful what you look for, because I started with one, and all of a sudden they just started, you know, they like started multiplying, and it's they go. And
you hooked on them.
Yeah, sure. And you say, I don't, you know, go to the shows. I'm not going to buy anything. Not going to do anything. You won't go home with 10. I mean, it's, not today, not today. Not going with. I won't find anything today. But so I got started. My first game was 1964 Oklahoma from Gotland, and it's a neat little game. I still have it. It's some days it works, sometimes it doesn't. My biggest hassle when you get too many games is just keeping them all going. You can see just walking around here, we have not as many games in there, but they always are breaking down. And if you're the only repairman, it's kind of tough to keep up. And so I got so many, I ran out of room at my house, so I ended up, to say, the second hobby is finding a place to put all these things. If you get serious about it, where do you put them all? I mean, it's easy to start out, well, I got a little game room in the house. You can put one in there, you can put two, and then you get, well, I move the table all the way, or we can get rid of the bed in the bedroom. We have a couple more in there, but then all of a sudden you get another one, you know, doesn't fit. So I ended up, over 20 years ago, buying a building and put them in. And that's what we call the museum here in town. Well, not town, it's out in the northwest of town in an area called Hockley. If you want some directions to it, you can look up lspinball.com. There's a little web page there. And on that web page, museum is misspelled because it's not a real live, you know, it's a joke. It started as a joke calling it a museum because you could send 25 bucks into the Texas Association Museum, and they'd send you a certificate back saying, hey, you're an official museum. So, well, yes, anybody can, you know. They're cheap, 25 bucks, yeah. So it started all that does is a joke, but we still, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy it. It's a fun, it's a joke, it's a hobby, and that's all I ever want it to be. But,
hey, Dan,
yes.
I've looked at that website before, and I know that it's your museum is open invitation only. It's because you're the only guy running it, right?
That's right. Available. That's right. So and it's say I'm old. I used to I worked for Texaco in the computer department. I did computer application design, development, support for 25 years. Before that, I was in the Air Force, and I did some computer support and applications with them, and worked on electronic gear.
Do you have like regular events through the year when you
nothing's ever regular.
Okay.
Well, I said there's one thing that's regular out there. The first weekend in April is we have a spam fest. So if you bring come and have to eat spam. So again, everything I say, everybody starts as a joke. This was a joke to have a party to drink beer. But and the spam fest grew, and it's been going longer. We're in our 13th year on that. But that started with just friends at work. You know, let's have a party, and we're watching, drinking beer, watching a Monty Python thing and whatever. It was on the ad or something, and well, that's a good reason. Something to do. Everybody has to bring spam with it. And we have people that love spam and eat it every day, and we have people that hate spam and will never taste it. And they all show up and order, but nobody order. We just all come out and have a good time. I've kind of gotten a habit of having 2, what we call HAAG parties a year. At least 2. We ended up with 4 this year or something like that.
We did.
So, and that's just, if you're on the mailing list, we pick a weekend and send it out saying we're having a party.
Okay, so I need to get on that deal.
But get on that mailing list. If you ever want to come to it, there's an email on that web page, or I can give you a card or something. You just have to email me. It's the best way to get a hold of it. Me. But I check my email once a day. I mean, when I got out of computers, I said I never want to see them again. But today's age, you got to have it. But all I have is just an email address. I do have a little web page out there, but that's it. And I still use computers to use Access to keep up my databases with all the list of all the junk I got and different stuff. But I try to stay off of them. I had enough of them. 40 years computers, working on them is enough. So. And it's sad that when he was the first guy was in there talking about all that display, I understood all that stuff because I used to do it. But we used to do games before there was a display. So how'd you do a game before there was a display? You'd write up, most of them were more linear programming, and you'd do a baseball game, and each of you would throw in a lineup, and each player had a percentage, and you'd do random number generators and play a baseball game. And then you'd print out a page on a sheet of paper and say, hey, wasn't that fun? They didn't sell any of those at all. But those that wrote them had fun doing it. And we just spend too many hours in a dark room writing programs. It's a lot more fun getting out playing the new ones. So that's where I'm at. Yeah. So to come see me, you just have to get a hold of me. So I do work. I took a package. I worked for Texaco when they were reselling. Chevron and Shell was buying everybody out. I took a package from them and thought, oh, that's fun. I'll take a little package from them and goof off for a year, catch up on fixing all my machines, and go back to work because I was 51 when I did that. And I found out I really enjoy not having to get up and go to work. We always get to do that. Somehow convinced my wife she could keep working and I could stay home. And it worked out great. I've had fun for say now for 16, 17 years.
Wow.
But I still do something part-time. I go teach at a community college. I teach some math courses, some college algebra to struggling minds. So, and that's fun too. So I've been doing that for 10 years. So it was fun when I got there. Everybody was. I thought I could relate to the younger guys. Now I go in. So they get people look really, really young. So we'll get back on pinball. So I got my first one in 1964, Oklahoma. It's neat and it's fine. My next one I got was a 1940 Genco formation. And it was really weird because there's no, of course, from 60s and after, you'd probably find a schematic for them. In fact, you could call the company and they'd sell you one. Anything older than 50, it's very hit and miss. It's a few of them in the early 50s had some schematics out, mostly the baseball games. But any other pinball machine or something, it's I don't know if they just didn't keep the records. They didn't think, well, nobody needs to know this or what, but the companies never saved them. So every once in a while you'll find an old one in a game somewhere, or somebody has found one, because I think they had them and shipped them with the games, but they didn't keep a historical thing for them. And so they're all gone. I mean, you're very, very lucky to find one. So my goal was I took that old 1940s game, and of course back then all those bumpers were plastic and they had completely started to deteriorate. You could touch them, they were just sticky. I mean, so that plastic, and you'll find that out on a lot of the older games, the plastic they use, how deteriorated. It's just gone. I mean, you have to completely replace them. But it's nice to know that that plastic, that bumper they used in 1940 when they first came out and put them on there, is really the same one they use today. Most of them, they weren't the jet bumpers or thumper bumpers, they were just the little single bumpers. And the mechanism underneath the playfield that signals and contact switches are different. Some of them In fact, all those, instead of a plastic, I don't know how many good y'all want bumpers and replace them, but instead of the plastic pin sticking down, just riding in a little cup to make contact, they actually have a wire sticking down through there. And it was in a little ring, and it made it, but that wire itself made contact. So what's the bad thing about that? Where it makes contact there for what, 80 years now, it's done burned off. But it's EMs are always fun. You'd open them up or have them open and turn off all the lights and start playing them, and you see all these sparks going everywhere. And they're just there. That's one way to find what's wrong with it. If it's really sparking, you can see that where the spark. But it's they're neat. So I learned how to do that, and I actually drew my own schematic, trying to trace all the wires and stuff. And the biggest surprise to me was the bridge rectifier they had used in it. And they call it a selenium rectifier, and it looks like a coil with just 4 wires coming off of it. And I'd never seen one. I mean, I'm old, but I'd never seen that before. They stopped using them long. But that's you look at some of the older games, you get back in probably, well, I guess 4 flippers from 47 back. There's some really strange looking electronic gear in there. I've got an old gun game I'm working on that instead of a bridge rectifier, they use diodes just sitting around in the circuit to make their own in the game. So it's all kind of weird stuff in there, and that's the challenge to me is when you get one of them. And I've started leaning toward more older games, even arcade and pinball from the 30s and 40s, because it's a challenge. I mean, you get one, it's what works. So it's really different. And then from that it just started growing. I mean, I got a baseball game and a shuffle bowler and for a game room, and we had a game room, and then started saying, oh, these are fun. I start looking. I know how to work on them now. I can go out and get one, and that's what I've done. I've always just looked and found them not working to repair them, and mainly it started out looking in the green, what we call the green sheet around here, or the up and down to nickel, Thrifty Nickel magazine, or any of those things, or just the classified ads in the newspaper. And you hit all the garage sales, and it's amazing how many you can find. Of course, Greg Bliss and he made it a lot easier to find what you have today. And these dreaded computers, but the internet is great. Without the internet, I think our hobby would have died about 10 years ago, because it was so hard to find parts. If you repair a machine, you almost had to find another one or go out and make your own. I mean, there was magazines around, and I used to do it. I used to write letters to people in California, and I'd wait a month and I'd get a reply back, you know. Because nowadays, I'd send the email to a guy in England, and we both have a game from 1934. What is it supposed to do? How does it work? Mine was missing some parts. His was missing parts. Luckily, we were missing different parts. So we both took pictures, and this is what I have, and so I sent it to him. He said thanks, and now we haven't done it yet, but we can now make a complete game. So he did. You want this?
Are 3D printers starting to be like used like to replicate parts for the or are they still not?
I think they're probably. I don't know if anybody's doing it for real yet, and surely no business is doing it. There might be a few people who have that as their other job and sneak in and do something every once in a while. And we all talk about that would be neat. Yeah, there's lots of things that would be neat to do to be able to build a part just from those. And we're almost there. I mean, I think we're there, but it's not. We just don't have it. Everybody doesn't have access to it every day. But and we talk about this, but there's, as far as you starting a business and getting in here, there's really not enough. I don't think there's enough money for you to support yourself doing pinball parts. And all the ones who are doing it, bless their hearts, most of them have taken their own money and spent lots of their own money to keep this hobby alive. And that's Gene Cunningham in there. I mean, he spent, I just don't think, I don't want to talk about them. They might know something at me, but I'm in awe that he did that, because I don't ever see how he'll get a good return on his investment. I mean, he could have taken that money and put it probably anywhere else and made more money. And well, that was the trouble while Williams went out of business. They could take their money and make something besides pinball and get a better return on the money. And that's why they stopped making pinball. It's sad, but I mean, it's if you're in a business, you're in a business to make money. We all like to make money. All of us that have a job, why don't we have a job? I mean, to make money, to go spend it on what you like to do. So we're getting off pinball. But yeah, the internet came out, and before the internet, I knew like 20 people in Houston and Dallas that collected these old games, maybe a few in California and Illinois that we would communicate or had met at shows, and we carried on conversations and said, oh, we're at the same interest, we can do things. But nobody could remake a part, because if you go out and reprint a backlash, it costs so much. I mean, the big deal is it costs as much to remake one of them as it does to make 50 of them. So you want to go make 50 of them, but then what are you going to do with 50 of those backlashes? You know, I need one. What am I going to do with the other 49? But it was hard to do. But with the advent of the internet and everybody all of a sudden communications and shows. I mean, it's amazing. When I got in this, there was one show in the U.S. There was one show in the world. It was in Chicago. It's been going on 27 years now. So it's still. I've been collecting along. It wasn't going when I got started. So there wasn't very few magazines ever done by love of somebody out of their garage. You know, typing something up, and you'd get 4 printed pages once a quarter. That'd mail out. So it was really, really tough getting the information out. And then the internet has changed all that, and boy, we've done it. The other great thing is like computers have done is the color technology. You go make a color copy now. Almost go down to Kinko's and make a color copy of your backlash that looks as good, or your translite. You got to have a bigger printer, but you can almost do that. You have the right JPEG or PDF file, whatever you want to have down there to remake those, you can do it. And so with making parts, again, making the parts, it's all been machine work or to do it. And the plastics, plastic's fairly easy unless you just, but you can just print it on there, have to cut them out. But I haven't really ever seen anybody do the 3D printing, but I wonder how well what all that can make. I mean, right now, the latest thing is there's somebody set up a website to do 3D printing, and you make your own gun out of paper and plastic using 3D printing. So anybody can just log on and print off and make a gun to carry around. But and that's scary. But then on the other side of that, that's great. Boy, there's some parts but then again, you have to be precision enough to draw that part, put in the right. I don't know how easy it is to set up to do 3D printing.
Well, with like new technology, like have you ever seen like the Kinect sensor? People have already started to mod those to use them like just with computers and stuff like that, and take like a 3D image.
3D image, yeah. I haven't seen one work. I've read about them, but just from scanning. But I mean, if that was needed, you had a part, you could just scan it 3D wise, or or get a hologram done at it, and then hit print, and it will make you some. And it looks like we're going to be there. I mean, you can probably do it today, but it's done in a lab somewhere. It's not available to all of us, but I see that coming, and that will, and I assume that will help our community, the pinball restoring community. Because otherwise, you say some parts are still, you can't find them. You can get some old games that are parts missing, and either you have to try to make it yourself or make something of it. And if you don't know exactly what, all of those, especially has some gears on it, what those gears should be, it's really hard to do one. But unless you just go to Chris Monroe's corner over there and you dig through those boxes. That's what it is. Say that. Train of thought. But that's all pinball, and so the internet's been a tremendous savior for our collecting hobby, as far as pinball and older stuff. And I printed off these sheets. I mean, this is what we used to get in a month. You know, somebody finally sat down and did all this stuff. The pinball, the milestone when pinball started and things. And I mean, they first started calling them pinball in 1931. Before then, they were just called trade stimulators or counter games. But there was some journalists in a magazine started calling them pinball, and that's how the name stuck. And the reason they're called pinball, if you look at those old 30 games, there was a flat board, a play field, with a whole bunch of pins in it, and you shot a ball and it bounced around that play field. So they were nicknamed pinball games, as compared to, they had ones that are called trade stimulators or counter games called penny drops. They have dice games. They have reel games where you push in a coin sheet and the reel spin. Those are forerunners to the slot machines and all those things. And to me, it's just seeing all those old 30 games and stuff, and you can see the history they brought to, and new games today are copying some of those same ideas. It is part of the genre of playing games. So it's really, really neat. But and the famous one on there, I always like, it's kind of neat, the fact that I'll show you how, like Baffle Ball that Gottlieb made. Gottlieb was really making other trade simulators. They're famous for the grip testers. You see how strong you are, and some little penny drops and stuff like that. And but they finally made Baffle Ball, and everybody enjoyed it so much, even though you could play for a penny. But you think back in 1930, it was worth quite a bit of money. You could buy a meal for a penny. So I mean, it wasn't like, and you know, it cost a penny. Well, that's in our days. Today's age, a penny ain't much. You people throw them away, you never pick them up. But back then, a penny was quite a bit. It was worth something. But they made 50,000 games. Well, that first one, because they sold that many of them. In fact, they couldn't make enough of them in the 30s. Well, you know, that's how Bally got started, because they were a distributor of other games, and they couldn't get enough from them, so they started making their own. And it wasn't hard back then. I mean, the technology that went into them wasn't hard. It was a little box with a slanted play field and some nails nailed into it. I mean, then you had to figure out some way to drop a ball in there. And again, I think it's interesting. You see all the ways they came up with to get the ball back up there. Carry it from the bottom of the play field up to the top. They did all kind of ways to do that. And it's kind of, everyone came up different, but they made them. I don't know how many different companies there were, but you look at people making pinball in the early 30s, they made them anywhere. There's people in Beaumont, Houston, Dallas, and a lot of them you'll see on them, they were homemade. Well, why were they? Because people were out of work, so they could do carpentry work, so they could build a box. How many people could build a box back in the 30s? And back then, probably everybody could. Because everybody, you couldn't pick up the phone and call the plumber back in 1930. Well, very few people could. You had to take care of things yourself. So everybody was a handyman back in the 1930s. So it's amazing that we didn't have more. We probably do have more 30s games that we don't even know about. And I guess in the last year, I think it's 3 times people have found a game that nobody ever heard about before. It has a name on it, but nobody has never seen it. Did they take it and just repaint it, or did they make their own? Nobody knows. A lot of it is just unknown history. Nobody knows, but they did. There was a lot of stuff. But in that, they did it, and it was really amazing how fast from the 30s things kind of advanced. I mean, in 33, they finally put electricity on it. And all it was, they had a little, usually if the ball dropped in a hole, it lit a light a light or ring a bell. That was about it. And the next step they did it, they had it where they had a little kick out hole. They finally added a coil. You hit something, it would raise something and kick it out, or advance the ball on down, or advance the other ball. So came up with those and kickoff balls, and those in the 30s. And I've got a game from 1934 that I enjoy playing as much as any of the one made in this past year, or up to through it for the next 80 years, called Major League. It's a little baseball themed game. It's fantastic. It's amazing that some of that stuff from then are as much fun to play as new games today. And it also amazing. I don't have one. I've seen a couple of them, but the Rockola made some games that were still mechanical, that just had amazing mechanical stuff in them. You would call jigsaw and that. You'd shoot balls, and it would actually, you'd work the puzzle. It flipped everything off of that. They have one called baseball, where it actually ran balls around the bases, and it was all mechanical. And they did it off of a big spring underneath. If a ball would go in, it would release that spring a little bit to the next notch, so it would just step through. And that same technology used, a little gun shooter in there by ABT that shoots it. When you've seen the newer ones, you had the different 5 targets in the background that they still make today. And if you hit a target, it just there's a spring was done, and it steps it down to the next catch till you release them all. So that same technology from the 1930s is still used in games today. So just kind of neat. So this was a list we used to have, and this was, somebody did it. They actually did this in the late 90s or early 90s when they came up, and we went back and did them. Before then we did it, but the amazing thing was, and actually in 1936 was the first time they did AC power. Before then everything was done off of batteries. And you talk about batteries leaking on the board today. And I don't remember, all y'all probably not know enough, used to when I went to school in the science fair, or science classes, you had a big old C battery, or those about that tall 6-volt batteries. That's what they used in the games. And they'd have a roll, about 6 of them down there in the bottom that were wired together, and that was gave them power. And of course they didn't, their battery life was lousy. What people use is started using, they would take those out and replace them with a car battery. Because you can't do that. But early car batteries was only 6 volts. So they just was a straight switch. Most of them were around about 6 volts what they used to draw on. They used a 1.5 volt, they'd put in 4 of them and get up to 6 volts for about where they were at. So most of those old coils are that. And I'm still amazed that I have all the old games I've got. I've never had a bad coil on the 30s game.
Wow.
At least they're good back then.
Well, they just weren't used that much. That's something really got stuck. They weren't, but yeah, they probably were. They probably used better wiring, heavier wiring, and wasn't the tolerance on them. Of course, it's hard to measure tolerance, but the tolerance back then is nothing like tolerance today. They just built something to make it last. They weren't worried about it. Well, we can save 2 cents if we use a little thinner wire to wrap this one in and get it a little smaller. It just wasn't on the deal. That's why. And in 36, well, like I say, 37 on here, but bumper came out with ballot, and it was the first game that actually put bumpers on the playfield. And they looked like little coil wires on top. Well, the end of that wire was sticking down through a ring, and the ball hit it and made them make contact. So it's kind of unique. You can see on top of the playfield, all those little sparks are even on top of the playfield where they're making that coils are making contact. So
It's challenging too.
oh, it's a fun game. Again, it's a fun game. Of course, in the 40s, everything shut down and do it. And then in 47 came back when Williams got started. Before then, Williams wasn't even a company. Harry Williams was in the business. He worked for Pacific Amusement Company out in California. And they made games in the 30s. They made one, that Major League was one that they made. So they did that, but he moved he started his company, and him and a guy in California and Chicago started it because they couldn't get enough of games from God Living Valley. They wasn't making enough games for them. And they were started out really as distributors. So they started forming a company to make their own games. So, and then it's amazing how things started out. They were the last one standing, or almost last one. Another big thing there, Humpty Dumpty was the first one with flippers on it in 1947. You ever played one of those one of the worst playing games ever? Those first ones they figured out how to do a flipper, but they didn't know what a flipper was for. But most of them, the early games before that, they had the playfield was just covered with bumpers. And the deal was to try to keep the ball in the middle of the playfield. So they put flippers down the side, so you'd hit those just to kind of, instead of it draining down the edge, you'd knock it back into the middle. So they had like 6 flippers, 3 on each side, just to try to keep it back in the middle. But it didn't take them long to figure it out. They had smart guys back in too, and now they finally put the flippers down where they are today. And I got some where they flip backwards, which is kind of weird when you play that game. But they also, right after they put them the right way, and people said, hey, this is what works. And it's, people talk about company espionage today. I think back in, everybody stole secrets. And it was funny, you read it. I said, I'm really not a historian, but I met a lot of people through this hobby that actually used to go to the library and read about all the company, and it's amazing all the lawsuits that was filed against the different companies from Gottlieb to Exhibit was another big one, to Williams and Valley. He was copying my idea, and they all kind of, and so that's one deal. You see something that's on Gottlieb game never showed up on a Williams or Valley game, but every once in a while they would. A variation of them would show up a little bit because they got very good at patent law real fast. So, and then I thought it was funny in here. Actually, there was pop bumpers made in 1948, but they really didn't show up on games until the early '60s almost. They had 1 or 2 games had them, but they never took off until later on in the '60s, where they got a little livelier game. All earlier than that, a little different. And you can see this is just a list of the first 4-player game. The first one, they went from scores on the back glass painted on there to the score reel that should be on here somewhere. I don't know which one is that. First one time they have the outlane returns to the flippers and all that stuff. It's and different things. And they tried everything. In '66, they made a game called 6-6, which was the first 6-player game. Found out that was a waste of money. Especially, I hate to lift that thing of all the EM stuff. 4 players are hard enough. But back in, also usually they made the same game, usually as a single player, a double player, and a 4-player game. And the most popular was a single player because it was a little cheaper. Each one of those added about $100 to the game. Of course, you could go buy a brand new game for $600. I think a Fireball from 1972, the original price was $970. You wish you could buy a few of those. New in the box. Yeah, but. Even '71, the first head-to-head 2-player game came Challenger. And I also thought it was funny. I got in this, and I went to the show in Chicago, or it was really in the suburbs of Chicago. But then I found out, started reading about some of the books that came out. And there's a whole bunch of books that came out in the mid '70s about pinball machines, collecting them and just that. It was kind of funny, even at that time. Pinball was still illegal in Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, California. They could not have pinball machines in most of the major cities, and I always thought it was unique or weird that Chicago pinball machines were illegal in Chicago, but all the suburbs around there where all the pinballs for the world were made. I mean, how did that work out? But and all these are just different fun things on here about the first electronic ones were in '76, and 1976 they did it, and it was a slow. Well, it wasn't slow, but it took them about 2 years to finally get around to all the companies finally saying, "Oh, we're going to go electronic." And there was a lot of course, those first electronic games are like anything. First time they introduced it, they're challenging today to try to keep going, and some of the electronic design they use is really very outdated. And for a long time, those were just throwaway games where you couldn't find electronic parts for them. And with the advent of the internet and enough people interested in it, people started remaking those games. Remaking the boards and the electronics for them. They just redesigned their whole boards. And now we have people smart enough to do all that we got into this hobby. So it makes it really neat. And so I think our hobby is growing. It's growing leaps and bounds. Now there's what, 10 or 12 shows just in the U.S. All over the place for hobbyists. And I hope CERN stays in business. I'll probably never buy one of their new in the box machines because I'm an old guy. I like finding a game not working and buying it and working on it.
Right.
And that's just my way I do things. But I hope they stay in business. I wish the best for Jersey Jack and all them others and everybody, all these people. And you've seen, I don't know, over the last 10 years, you've seen a lot of people saying, I'm going to start a pinball company, and then you hear that announcement, and 4 years later, you never hear from me, because they don't realize it takes lots of money. Money and time, and getting the right people involved. And it's tough. I can't believe it. We're doing it, and with all the things on the backside of this. I don't know. I mean, you'd read through all those, and it's interesting just to see how the development of the pinball came about. What much time we got for it. I'm bored you 20 more minutes. You're going to have a test.
I'm ready.
Dan, what made you want to buy your first machine? I mean, what was it that made you want to buy a pinball machine?
My wife wanted one.
Oh, did she really? That's what it was.
We set up a game room. A friend of mine was getting rid of a pool table, and I really didn't play pinball growing up. My bad habit was shuffleboard and shooting pool. So we got a pool table, and I put it in, and over one weekend we went up to my wife's parents' house around Waco, and her cousin actually restored old jukeboxes. We thought, well, it'd be nice to get an old jukebox to go in to play those old 45. Everybody know what a 45? Yeah, it's old enough in here. Everybody knows what a 45. Play some, get a jukebox to sit in there and set up our game room. And when we was there, of course, as we all know, you're in this business, when you go buy a jukebox, you're allowed to be told, well, you got to take these 10 pinball machines out here. So that's what would happen to him. He had some pinball machines, and he had one, and we sat there and played it all weekend. My wife said, hey, we should get one of these to go in our game room too. That'd be another addition. So that's how we got our first one. We got it. He said, well, you come across another one, we'll get it. And how I got into it after that was he started calling me up saying, hey, I've got this pinball machine. Do you want to, it doesn't work. And he hated working on pinball machines. And I said, well, yeah, I'll take it. I'll try to figure out what it was. And that's how I got my first 10 games, was as him throwing them, instead of throwing them out, trash, I would go get them. And he started working on them. Because he was just interested in the jukeboxes. He didn't care less about pinball machines. And so that's how we got started. It's all my wife's fault. So
So she can't say anything.
Blame it on her.
Well, she finally figured out, said, yes, I wanted a pinball machine. And her deal is that she would still like to only have one pinball. She still just wanted one. And she had one. Her favorite game is 8-Ball Deluxe.
Do you still have that one that you started with?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
What was it?
Oklahoma. Yeah. Terrible back glass. I've been looking for 40 years for a new back glass, and I've never found another back glass.
Was it in hot?
No. It's set up out there, and it works. Some days it works, some days it does not. Go back and do it, but it's the game has rollers with targets in it, and shooters for the balls. Kind of a split play field, so it's a neat game. Neat game. I need to. And I mean, used to the old games, if you didn't have a back glass for it, again, it became junk. People just threw them away because it was hard to find a back glass. There's very few. They remade some of the back glasses, but they're only for probably 10 or 20 games. I mean, until lately, it was 10 or 20 games of the really important historical games. The only one they made back glasses for. Or somebody who had enough money would go make some for his game. But other than that, very few backlashes were remade. You know what I've done, and so used to, you didn't have a backlash, you know, oh well, what do we do this game? Well, we parted out. With the color printers today, and I've done a few. I've got on and designed my own backlash, made it personal, different things, and put it in there and put them in there. And I have about 4 or 5 of them at my place up. Of course, new people coming in have no idea. It looks just good. There's a picture on there's a picture on the backlash. Some of them are sprayed. Well, golly, how did your picture get on that backlash? Or I got one of them just old friends from work, all on the one. Well, they were surprised if there was a backlash made with our picture. But it was just, you go into Photoshop, build you a picture, print it off, go take it to Kinko's, print it off, stick it between 2 pieces of plexiglass. And I found that the best ones I found is just printing on plain white paper, put it between 2 pieces of plexiglass, gives a better hue than putting on their Kinko's Translite film. Like you can get on a Translite film, but I'm missing that technique to make it look good enough on a Translite. It lets too much light through. You probably need another backing on it to make it work better. I don't know what, I never did find the right backing on it, so I just do it on plain white paper and block off the lights, and it does pretty good. The non-pinball people have no idea it's not even a real thing. And then some pinball people don't even realize it. But that's neat, and then that's neat. That's great that computers are caught up with us, or a lot of this technology really helps our deal. I always thought the other thing was weird. I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, we used to wonder how many games were made. You know, how rare is this game? And you could not get production numbers from any of the companies. And this one, finally, in the late 90s, this guy named Dennis Dolan, I don't know, you know him, he's actually out of St. Louis. He started the first, our Pin Game Journal is going on now. He started the first pinball magazine back in the 70s and wrote it. And it used to be, like I said, about 4 or 5 type pages that he would mail out every couple of months to people. Became the Pinball Trader, and then it got sold. Finally, he'd do it, go back in. So most of it is a hobby. People, that's a lot of work just to print all that out. They'd burn out after about 3 or 4 years, and then somebody else would pick it up and go through it. So that's that. But it was, the companies would not tell anybody how many games they made. And I always thought that was funny. Who cares how many games you made of this model in 1948 or in 57, 63. Who cares how many models you made? I mean, oh no, that's a corporate secret. We can't do that. Our competitors will use that against us. I mean, we're in 1980. How many models you made of Monte Carlo in 1964? I don't see how that's going to affect it at all. But and I don't know. Williams was the last company to. I think they finally released this just a couple of years ago. Let their production numbers come out. And of course, this was Bally. Bally's turned out to be fairly easy. Of course, they sold out to Williams. I think maybe some of this came, one of their disgruntled employees, I guess, stole the information and sent it out. But Gottlieb never was. Nobody would want to produce those numbers for anybody. But you can see on here what the normal runs of different games were. And which is that? I mean, the 72 Fireball, it was a popular game. They only made 3,800 of those. And the other big game that they made was Captain Fantastic. Then they made 16,000 of those. That's why you see those everywhere. That was the big hit. That was a golden era of pinball in the mid-70s. They made Williams, Bally had Wizard and Captain Fantastic. And their pinball was everywhere. And then they went to electronic. But even in electronics, I mean, you look at Evel Knievel 8-ball was the biggest one at 20,000. That was the biggest one for the longest. Oh, Flash, where's Flash at? That's Williams. Okay. I think Williams Flash pinball had the highest numbers of any of the 70s games, 70s and 80s games. And it was, I think it was, a little bit better than the 8-ball on Valley. I think I heard 26,000 of those were done. I don't know. Again, we never know, but people did it. And there was a big push for a while, just trying to find out how many were made. As collectors, we'd take the serial numbers and you'd report them there, and we'd just start dividing, subtracting the biggest one from the lowest one and saying, okay, that's so far we know they made at least 2,000 of them because those serial numbers are that far apart. So, and it was amazing how much effort people was put into just trying to figure out how many games they made, and whether one's rare or not. But you didn't see it. And to me, this is interesting. You're in the history about how many different games are made. I don't know now if there's any place on the internet where you can get this for Williams or Yacht Club. I know people have been working on it. You go to the serial number plank, they'll show you the highest and lowest, so you can kind of get a little bit of a number how many was made for each game of those. But I still think it's strange that the companies just will not release that information. And I don't know. I mean, even Stern today, who cares how many Pirates of the Caribbean they made 2 years ago? I mean, how does? Yeah, I mean, they made 2,000 of them, 3,000 or 4,000. I don't know. It's weird that they so secretive. I didn't see there saying, "Oh, I'm not going to tell you how many." Of course, to me, Stern, it shouldn't matter to Stern right now. They're the only one. They don't have any competitors. So, okay, we plan to make. To me, it would be a selling department. We only plan to make 3,000 X-Men. If you want one, you better get it now. Because everybody knows they're lying. Because if they get an order in, they're going to make some more. They've already done it. It's just a historical thing. What was, when you go back, we used to go to all the shows, and it was always, you go to some of the business side shows saying, what was the most popular pinball game ever made? Anybody have any idea?
Adam's Family?
Well, it was 8-ball deluxe, and it was most popular to the business because it pulled in money longer than any other pinball machine in history, and pulled in more money. And it was out on the circuit longer than any others. It won. Every year they give a top award to the top money maker of the vending companies, and 8-ball won more of them than anything else. I was at one of their corn-op shows. I guess I was in the late 80s or 90s, and that was the top one. Adam's Family, I mean, now we think of the newer ones, they made that, but I don't know they ever have made the money that the games in the 80s made. I haven't seen the reports, but I mean, you talk to the operators and they go, we don't want pinball, we don't make any money off of it. So I don't know why Adam's Family and Twilight Zone didn't make more money out there for them. I would think they would have made money, but I've never seen that. I'm talking enough about me. We're kind of opening up the mindset. We'll open up the questions. Anybody have any other irrelevant information you don't want to talk about?
Dan, is there one title? I know you've probably seen them all, had them all maybe. Is there one title that's eluded you, that you've never been able to obtain?
Well,
that you want, it's high on your want list?
I always wanted a Dragonette, which is a 50s wood rail from Gottlieb. And they're out there, but it's always been one of the popular games. I always wanted one of it. I mean, the play on it is okay. It's not the greatest, but I just love the artwork on it. And I always wanted to get one. They reprinted the back glass, and I bought a new back glass just hanging on the wall. But I always wanted that game. But again, I've hurt myself as far as collecting wise, because I'm not going to go buy a working one, and people resell them at a retail price. My deal is I'm not going to pay retail price. I'll wait and find one broken and buy it and fix it up. And that's the only one I've never been able to find broken that somebody wanted to sell. And part of the reason that is they know if they can pay somebody to fix it up, they'd make more money off of it selling it retail, because it's always been a very popular game. And that used to be on my list of one. I used to say that's one I'm looking for, but even today it's not. I'm not really looking for anything anymore. I've got gone through so many of them and doing them.
Plenty of projects,
And I got more projects, so there's more to do than I ever do. But then I just bought 4 2 weeks ago. And that's completely that's completely off schedule with me. But I got a teed off and a pool short, and I had gotten a bad cats from a friend from earlier than that, saying, "Oh, what all these electronic games?" I don't know. But it's very simple. I got them at a great price. Somebody want to get rid of them. That's how I buy things. You want to get rid of it? Yeah, we'll make a deal. Make me a good price. I'll pay a good price for a new one. I mean, there's some or an old one. It doesn't matter. Other ones, I had an old friend, and he called me up, and I went and picked up 11 games from him that he wanted to get rid of because he needed to clean out. He had them stored at his son's place, and his son, they got to go. He called me up, and I went and got them. The interesting that there was 5 of them with the bottom bodies with no heads, and that's always used to be the joke. What happens to all the missing heads? You find all the bottom parties of games, but they're always missing a head. Very seldom do you find a room full of heads. I've never heard of anybody finding a room full of the heads of a pinball machine. They're always the bottom body on that. And there's all kind of theories about why does that happen.
Mount them on the wall forever.
Yeah, people just take them in themselves, and that's easy to move. So, you want to say something? Well, we'll take these and we'll go put them in a better place because it's glass. We want to protect the glass, so they get separated from the bottom part. We'll just throw it in the back shed, and people will take them and save that artwork, hang them on the wall, and all kinds of things. So.
In your collection, do you have any Atari pins?
Only one that's working.
Yeah.
A Hercules.
Hercules. I've got a Middle Earth that I haven't fixed yet.
Yeah.
I had my one machine.
I had some parts for some, maybe some play fields, and it used to be sad that I've known several people who's gotten a hobby and they just get burned out after 5 or 10 years. They just well, their wife says, "I'm gonna shoot you unless you get her clean out all that junk ball back there." And
she got excited about it because it was Middle Earth. She thought it was Lord of the Rings.
Close enough. Close enough. That's as close as you'll get.
Yeah. But I just had some extra play fields and parks for those. I never had one. And knock on wood, my Hercules been working good. And Hercules was funny. I mean, I went and picked it up off a guy it's down around Kima. I went down there to buy the Gottlieb Big Indian from him, which is 70. That's what I wanted. Well, here, you got to take this too. That's electronic. 2 things. That's electronic. I don't want it.
And it's
2.
huge.
It's huge. I had to make 2 trips. I said, well, if I want it, I got to come back and get it. I can't carry it all at one time. So, and then I say hindsight's great. It's probably the best deal I ever made. I paid $100. Well, I don't even think I paid $100 for it. I think it was part of the other deal. I paid $100 that one, and then I got that one 25 or 50, and it worked. So, she used to say we used to go to Chicago show. I had one of the Chicago shows, and there was 3 Hercules there. One of them was working. They set it up outside, and they was trying to sell they couldn't sell any of them. Nobody would buy them because it's just too. You got to have room to put one of those things. And I think it's kind of
those Chicago shows that they have in the suburbs where it's like all the 50s diner stuff and the arcade stuff. Is that?
No, there's this is what's called the Pinball Show or Expo in Chicago.
Yeah, it's like Fox Run or something.
No, that's the different. That's a corn op collectors operator show.
I've been to those.
Coca show, and they're neat. I always told you want to buy pinball machines, go there because they just throw pinball machines out to the side, and they're in the jute boxes and music boxes and old vending things, and they have pinball machines because they had to haul them off to get the good stuff. So you can pose these I think, of course, some of that's changed now with having the internet. Everybody goes out and looks it up. Is this a good game? Or in the past, you could, it kind of hurt us a little bit because back in, well, it's a pinball machine. Is it any good? Oh, no, it's not any good. Nobody wants that game. You said, oh, I gotta get it. But yeah, it's a different one. It used to always be planned a week or before or a week after the big corn op show just in Chicago. But it used to be at the Rosemont Hotel by O'Hare.
Displays,
Yeah, and they moved again. So I haven't been in about 5 years because it's just kind of hard to hit all the shows. There's a couple of them I'd like to go to. I'd like to go. There's one in Yorktown, Pennsylvania. It's supposed to be very good. They have a bunch of older pinball machines. Always been older wood rails and things, and 30s and 40s game.